New York City is one of the wealthiest cities in the world and the financial capital of the world, and yet food insecurity in the city is rampant. About 1 in 3 adults and nearly half of families with children experience food hardship each year, defined as sometimes or often running out of food or a person worrying that they will. At the same time, about 40% of all food in the United States goes unsold or uneaten each year. The greenhouse gas emissions that result from this wasted food are equivalent to the annual carbon dioxide emissions of 42 coal-fired power plants. Once this excess food is produced, the best way to minimize the climate impacts is to donate or upcycle the food that will otherwise go to waste. What if this excess food in the food system could be rescued and put to use to create jobs, to build community, and to combat inequality and food insecurity? This is exactly what a nonprofit organization in New York City called Rethink Food has been doing since its founding in 2017 by Matt Jozwiak, who is a former chef at 11 Madison Park, a restaurant in Manhattan with 3 Michelin stars, voted, also in 2017, the world's best restaurant. Rethink Food began finding and rescuing excess food in the food system and turning it into high-quality meals that they gave away through their growing list of partner organizations in the city. The organization remains chef-led, priding itself on creating nutrient-dense, culturally relevant, and great-tasting meals. Rethink Food has grown rapidly since its founding and today serves over 40,000 meals a week, sometimes over 50,000 meals a week. They've accomplished these amazing numbers by partnering with restaurants and other kitchens around the city, often creating meals between lunch and dinner, when the kitchens typically see little use. Ken Baker is one of the people who's been with Rethink Food through much of its growth. He grew up with a single mother in Baltimore and experienced food insecurity himself as a child, before getting into food service early in life. He now serves as the culinary director at Rethink Food and helps build the organization's impact through the relationships he's built around the kitchen and around the city. I met Ken in the course of production on a new film I'm making about consumption and waste in New York City. I've found him to be an extraordinarily warm person, driven by deeply held values. For me, Ken's story, and the story of Rethink Food more broadly, is one of cascading solutions. I often talk about cascading crises, of climate change, habitat destruction, mass extinction, and environmental injustice. Ken and Rethink Food show us that this cascading effect can also work in reverse, a cascade of solutions, rather than a cascade of crises. It's inspiring and hopeful. It turns out that a solution to the huge ecological problem of food waste can also serve as a solution to injustice, inequality, food insecurity, loneliness, lack of purpose, lack of community, and more. I'm John Fiege, and this is Chrysalis. You can subscribe at johnfiege.earth, where you will also find show notes and all episodes of the podcast, plus my writing, photographs, and films. I recorded my interview with Ken in September of 2025 during Climate Week at the offices of Rethink Food. Occasionally, in the distance, you'll hear the telltale signs of life in the heart of Manhattan. Here is Ken Baker. So can you start by telling me where you grew up and what your relationship was to both food and to nature when you were a kid, and whether you saw a connection between food and nature when you were a kid?
Okay, I'll start from reverse that question. I don't know that I recognize the connection between food and nature, but when I look back at it, they were both bookends of my childhood experience. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I think I'm of that last generation of people who, went outside and played all day until the lights came on, and then there was, just enjoyed everything that was around them and really used the power of our imagination. Not only did I grow up in Baltimore, Maryland, but I grew up on the west side of Baltimore in the 90s, and food was paramount. Food was how we communicated. And, love and affection wasn't easily given in words or in action, but how we, knew that love was there through food. The fact that everyone in my family worked, but, the fact that we took time to make sure there were meals, there was food prepared for everyone. And it was a communal thing. It wasn't just, a woman thing. What my great-grandfather was a pivotal individual in my life and really the most constant male figure in my life. And, he would cook alongside my great-grandmother. Fridays, having fried fish on Fridays, that was him doing that. Or he would get up in the morning, early Saturday mornings, and go to the market and get all the trimmings and fixings for Sunday dinner. And they each played their kind of part. It was like a chessboard of a menu for Sunday dinner, my grandfather would kind of focus on the fried fish, and like, we would sit on the Saturdays after he came back from the market on the porch and like pick the peas or, trim the collard greens. It very much was like a ritual. And in those moments, there was not a lot spoken, but a lot was felt and said. And when I look back at that, I feel that warmth. And then that couple that when you couple that with nature, just being outside and, enjoying the environment around me, playing, going to the woods and using our imagination and simultaneously being outside and using that imagination all day will work up an appetite and you're looking forward to see what would be on the dinner, what would be on the stove. And it wasn't anything like fancy or prescribed. We didn't have like spaghetti night or, pizza night or Taco Tuesday. We very much were the definition of food insecurity. And so all our meals were predicated on what we had, but there was some level of intention put into that, an intention on who we're feeding. If I was out playing with some friends and most of my parents or my grandparents or great-grandparents knew that didn't have that same level of oversight or that meal waiting for them, well, that meal would be coming by way of our household. And so when I think about food and nature, there are two perfect bookends to my childhood experience and really defined my childhood experience. Both food and nature kind of acted as like that guide map to when my parents were at work. Nature, I knew the bounds of where I could go out and play. And with food, it was that constant anchoring that brought me back.
Yeah. So what got you interested in cooking?
That's a funny story. When I tell people this, I hope my mother didn't hear this, but honestly, like, my mother wasn't the best of cook. And I didn't realize that until I started working when I was 14. My first job was I was a busboy at a country club, and, being around that level of cuisine, I'm like, oh, wait, is my mom doing? She doesn't really know how to do this thing called cooking, but you don't know what you don't know. And so partly that, but also, like I said, I started working when I was 14, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with life. And my manager at the time, Leo Bistro, I'll never forget him, he told me, hey, you should go and get a degree in hospitality management. You can veer out into culinary arts, into all these different avenues, but more importantly, it's an interesting field in which you will understand because of the work you're doing here, but also give you this business acumen, which makes you a professionalized individual. And then you'll develop intangibles with service that will make you invaluable for the rest of your life. And so, that's what got me into cooking, and grateful for it. And what I love about cooking, and I want to put a start asterisk on this. Though my last name is Baker, I am a terrible baker. I hate baking because baking is very much like a science. It's very prescribed and precise and regimented. And as you know, John, you spend a lot of time with me. I'm very much a creature that likes to feel my way through things and likes to go with the flow of the environment. And that doesn't pertain well for baking. But for cooking, that's what I enjoy, because everything that I cook, comes out a little different every single time. And I like that.
I'm the same way, but I've never thought of it that way before. So you've now explained
absolutely.
To me, because I'm the same way. Baking has always been stressful.
Exactly.
For me. Like,
even a regiment to like
an eighth of a teaspoon.
Or
Are
like
you kidding me?
And then when they start talking about grams, when you get into things that are more prescribed, like popovers or scones, and then like it's even granular down to like the type of oven you have, and
right.
Like I don't want all that regiment.
So you were working in Washington, D.C. When the COVID pandemic hit. Can you tell me what happened and how you ended up here in New York City and finding out about Rethink Food?
Well, what happened was I've had a myriad of professional experiences, but at that time I had returned to my roots, which again, like Leo, inspired me to always be able to find a job. And when the current administration came into office the first term, I was then at the time doing public policy and advocacy for a nonprofit organization called the National Development Council, doing economic community development. And unfortunately, with the president coming into term, about halfway through that term, about 2018, the board realized it wasn't a strong investment to maintain what is a very high, costly investment to have a DC presence. Just like New York, real estate is astronomically high, and with no really ROI, because there was no instance in which that administration would push forward any of the policies or regulatory framework that supported community and economic development. And so they closed the office down. And, when I lost that job, I went back to my roots of bread and butter of the hospitality industry. And in an ironic twist, I got a job at the Trump International Hotel.
Which is crazy.
Which at the time was one of the marquee places to work in DC. And from where I'm from in Baltimore, DC is like the New York for the Mid-Atlantic. It's like where every chef, anybody who's trying to be on the top of the industry, that's where you're working. And because he was president, no matter in our industry, it's not about partisanship. It's about being able to operate in that ecosystem, that atmosphere, which requires a level of protocol training, which requires a level of pre-screening that you can even be around the president. You've had your, background checks verified through Secret Service, and you know how to operate on tight deadlines, and you can operate with Secret Service over your shoulder, seeing what you're doing. Just having that level of expertise under your belt makes you very marketable, because that's not just for the president or his cabinet, but congressional leadership, the diplomatic service corps. All the world comes to D.C. because it's the nation's capital, and having that level of expertise just makes you very marketable. And so the fact that we had, first time in our lifetime, a president that was from our ilk, from our industry, and really celebrated this, what we do as a craft. And he took one of the most historic buildings in DC, the old post office building, and turned it into this beautiful gem of 21st century modern luxury in DC, which is has a very antiquated Georgian old type of feel. It was just where people wanted to go, especially international travelers that were used to that level of accommodation that DC just didn't have. And so I landed there and was working there, and it was great. I was making, at the time, the most money I've ever made in my life. Cash was flowing, and we heard all the stories, when you see the Rudy Giuliani that just post up in there, like I saw him every single day. I saw all of those figures every single day, but I appreciate being in that moment, not saying that I am giving a tacit approval of the administration's policies and procedures, but I got to see that human element of those individuals who are, you kind of get a caricature of what you see in the media. And even the president, who if he was to walk in this room right now, he would recognize me. And it actually creates a lot of tension with me, because I've seen a side of him that most don't get to see. I've seen a very loving and doting grandfather. And he has about, I think at this point, like 12, 13, 14 grandkids. And he loves every one of them dearly. And then it forces me to this spiritual conviction. I'm sure you're going to have questions about my faith, which guides everything I do. In which, that forgiveness of your quote unquote enemy, or that love of your neighbor, even if you don't agree with your neighbor. But when you see just the stark ugliness of the world right now, and that he's either a catalyst of it or at the center of it, it's a lot of conflated feelings. But there, I was making a lot of money, being around a lot of people, operating at the highest level of my craft. And then March 15th, 2020 happened. And the president had just came off of his impeachment acquittal. He was riding high, approval ratings very high going into his reelection. And he did an Oval Office address in which, because we were at the Trump International Hotel, we had it streaming on every single TV, including this massive TV in the foyer of the Grand Lobby. And, I walked out of the hotel that night and never walked back in as an employee again. And it's within that time, and we saw the fragility of our industry. And so we were on lockdown. And if you guys remember, DC was one of the strongest lockdown cities for the longest duration of time. And that's partly what got me here to New York. Lockdown was fun for the first month, 2 months. And then it was like the weather started shifting. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be out. I want to enjoy life. At the time, that was 5 years ago, so I was in my early 30s. Just got fucking bored. Oh, can we cuss on this?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got bored, and my best friend of many, many years from childhood, Jenny, she was already up here in New York, and she was operating a cafe and flower shop in Bed-Stuy. And just like us, she was locked down, and so she didn't operate. But then New York started opening up in the late spring, early summer. And I just needed to get out the house. I needed to do something. And DC wasn't opening up anywhere on the horizon. And so I rented a car one way on May 15th, 2020 with a suitcase and my dog, and came up here. I was expecting to be here for help Jenny out for the summer. She lucked up on this amazing spot in Greenpoint, which at the time was one of the most up-and-coming neighborhoods, and right now is one of the most high occupied, high rent, up-and-coming neighborhoods. I was building that space out for her. And then when we opened up in the winter of 2020, we were at Green and Manhattan, and Caddy Corner there on Manhattan was this restaurant called Esme, and they would get flowers from us when we first opened up. The then maitre d', I think she was a maitre d' or hostess, but she was the girlfriend of the then owner. who would ultimately become my boss here at Rethink. And when we were just talking one day and she learned about my background and she was like, oh my God, you need to talk to my boyfriend. And the rest is history. I started out with Rethink as a volunteer while I was still building out the shop because we still were getting unemployment. And I don't know if you remember at the time, but people, especially in the service industry, were, juxtaposing, do I go and return back to work and and it wasn't that people didn't want to work, but particularly for our industry, consumption or people weren't going out at the regular rate. And so like servers weren't making what they were making. And it wasn't a guarantee you would have a whole 40-hour week. It was kind of like this part-time thing. And was it worth it? Like messing up your full-time unemployment. So I started Rethink as a volunteer just to maintain that consistent employment I was getting from the state. But I was volunteering every single day. And getting into space, I recognized that it wouldn't be long until an opportunity like the one I hold now would come to bear because just the organization was hyper accelerating. And what I loved about it was led by my now boss, our founder and CEO, Matt Jozwiak, who's only been a line cook and CEO. He's leading this organization from our lens. And so it's very much like I am the perfect person to not only encapsulate and understand his vision, but take it to the next level because where he and I both are yoked in the hospitality side of this work, he's learning how to work in a nonprofit while running a nonprofit and founding a nonprofit and funding that nonprofit, whereas I'd had experience in the past. And here we are doing this amazing work. And now, 4+ years into it and 2 kitchen sites later and massive expansion and many people who we've employed and helped along the way, very grateful.
Awesome. What does Rethink Food do? And how has your job evolved over time?
Yeah. What we simply do is that we are combating food insecurity from the lens of chefs. We are a chef-led nonprofit, and our mission is to create a more sustainable and equitable food system. But really what we're doing in celebrating that is 2 core things. We're combating food insecurity from the lens of chefs, which is A, making the food delicious. We fundamentally believe that food is a human right and people should have access to food, especially in the global food capital of the world and in the most resource nation in the world. Secondly, we have an amazing sustainability story in which we celebrate in doing that. We're collecting excess from every appendage of the food ecosystem, and who better to take this excess that would otherwise go to waste or go to landfills and exacerbate our climate crisis, who better to take that and curate cuisine with that than chefs? And I'll tell you this, a secret of what we're doing is also empowering chefs, because I'll tell you this, chefs want to do this work. Most chefs do not like the fact that our God-given talents are reserved for those that have means or who can appreciate them. Most of us, and in doing that on the private side, we don't even get to cook for our families because we're at work 10, 11, 12, 14 hours a day. It's just the constraints of either the industry or the necessity of that paycheck. Or there's just preconceived notions around this type of work and if it's even legal. And it's so perfect how every single junction I've had in both my personal and professional careers have collided to the culmination of what I bring to this seat that I occupy. And it's just creating that posture of community, reminding ourselves that we're all in this together. And we've gotten so far away from that. We've gotten very siloed as just society's gotten more secular. We're more insulated with all the advancements of technology, particularly the internet, where like you honestly don't have to leave your house to do anything. But our basic biological design is to be in fellowship and community with each other. And the more that we are in community with each other, those otherness that separate us, it doesn't become a factor.
So tell me a bit about food waste in New York City. How big of a problem? How big of a problem is it? Why is it happening? And how does Rethink Food engage with this problem?
It's a massive fucking problem. And what we are doing, first I want to anchor everyone here what we're doing at Rethink. None of us here are rocket scientists. We are a whole bunch of just cooks who just want to make good food for people. And I think the problem with food waste, first of all, food waste is a massive problem here in New York City. New York City, and more broadly in this country, 40% of food that's grown or produced doesn't touch a human lip. It goes directly to landfills. And here in New York City, when you see so viscerally the need of individuals who are food insecure, that's 1 in 7 New Yorkers. That's 1 in 4 kids. And when you scale it out per capita for our population at almost 10 million people, it's almost 1 million people every single day don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And when you talk about food waste, that's why we're capturing as much viable excess. And I want to put everyone's concerns aside. We are not dumpster diving. Everything that we're serving is perfectly suitable for human consumption. And when we dive deep into our model, I'll talk about really the unique advantages that we have here in New York in rescuing food. But this food is perfectly good for human consumption. And there's a lot of ways in which exacerbate this, but it simply comes down to that in New York City, but more broadly, we don't move food on the basis of nutrients and nourishment. We're moving food in this commoditized, capitalistic way. It's all about the bottom line. And here in New York City, even when we talk about ways and solutions to combat food waste, we don't even properly, though we get charged when you want to have composting in a commercial services like we do here, it is a extra layer of money that you're paying on top of your waste stream, on top of your recycling. Composting is the most expensive, and even at that rate for private couriers, and even with the advance that the city's trying to, force, which I believe that's part of our stewardship as community. We're doing this to preserve the sustainability of our natural environment. We should compost, but if you're going to charge people for composting, let's actually compost. We don't even properly compost in this state. Most composting that is privately freighted away goes to this facility in New Jersey, which doesn't even properly compost. And I don't even think that most of the private carriers in which you are paying for composting are for actually composting, because then it's the level of intention where that has to be in a separate vehicle. Unlike the co-toting of trash and recycling together, composting has to be a separate vehicle because it's a whole separate process. And any contamination with that organic matter is going to ruin the whole formula that makes composting what composting is. And so that's one of the big problems. I think the problem comes from a posture of just over-complications. And that's what we do here at Rethink. That's where we get our identity from. Rethinking is not creating anything new. It's just assessing the landscape and just connecting the dots in the most simple way for people to understand, but also to amplify impact for the constituents that we serve. If the city or state really wanted to tackle food waste in a very real way, they would just convene or fund the major players who are involved in this, which are restaurants, food service operations, chefs, and the waste haulers. We work in tandem anyway. All of us who operate F&B businesses after our overhead of rent, food, labor, that fourth biggest expense is probably waste hauling. And whatever cadence, depending on what neighborhood you live in, and we are here in the Village, which if you look up at our street signs, they are brown. We're in a historic district. And so we have to have, every day that we're operating, we have to have waste haul picked up every single day. And those commitments, okay, I can't just, if I'm having everyday pickups, I can't have compost just come one day. What's also a big problem with combating food waste is that only a sizable entity like government can really combat it in a real way, but they're short-sighted and they want these instant successes. And because they've been wanting this for the better part of at least since the Bloomberg administration, which is over 20 years, we've had these starts and stops and fits of all these things that are supposed to be the next best things in sliced bread, and they've all failed, or they're still, dormant or underfunded or not fully deployed out to all the areas of need. And so I think just also the general public has just lost their faith in government's ability to do this. And so they're looking to individuals like us at Rethink. And it's often like, when we get in these spaces, it's like, oh my God, you're Rethink. Because just what we're doing so simply is just also very understandable for the layperson to wrap their head around. And it just makes sense.
That's cool. And where do you get the food from?
So we collect food from every appendage of the food ecosystem. Again, that's the unique advantage that we have that's built in from being a chef-led nonprofit, is that we know where the food exists within this ecosystem, whether that's private or public, commercial, wholesale, retail. And so we collect food excess from every appendage of the food ecosystem, from retail partners like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, from corporate cafeterias and all the big high rises, from college campuses to large-scale caterers and events companies like Great Performances and Rhubarb Hospitality here in New York City. to individual events. When you look at New York, it is this convening spot. And so whether it's the Armory Show at the Javits Center or the upcoming Food Network Food and Wine Festival, where we're their sustainability partner, or one of our, board members, Chef JJ, one of his events or pop-ups, or our co-founder, Daniel Hume, any of his pop-ups or events, and even his restaurant. We collect food from independent restaurants. Anywhere where there's food excess that's suitable for human consumption, we will send our refrigerated fleet of vehicles out and capture that. Because every single vehicle is refrigerated. Every single person that touches that process, which is illuminated in our logo, which you see on my hat, is New York City Health Department food handler certified, to demonstrate to our communities that we aren't doing anything or creating food that we will not eat. And we're doing so with the utmost care and stewardship with hospitality and culinary professionals who understand time and temperature abuse, who understand the needed infrastructure to capture food, that when we capture that food, we are assessing it for viability and temperature checks right then and there. Then we're loading up into our vehicles. And then when it comes back, either either our facility or any of our partner facilities, we're doing a secondary check on ensuring that every touch point and every junction, while that excess is moving through the chain before it becomes a meal, is stewarded through our hands. And our partners are grateful to do it. Particularly, I think about our retail partners like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. Like when we're off for services, we do build in, again, we want to create a more equitable space. We want to curate that meal with compassion, understand who am I serving? We don't want to just make meals and give them to people and they should just accept it because they're hungry. That's not dignified. When we go to the grocery store, when we go out to the restaurant, we have the freedom of choice. We want to bring that back here. We don't want this to feel othered. We don't believe that you should go to a social service office to get a meal. We don't believe in qualifiers, demonstrating your need. What are you asking somebody? Show me you're poor. That's like showing me you're sick. If anyone's dealing with a chronic illness, that's not dignified. Also, it doesn't give the invitation for community. And so in fostering community, we want to just bring dignity back to this work.
And you told me in the past a story about when you were a kid and on assisted lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were very much food insecure growing up in the 90s, as many people were in Baltimore. And looking back, I can see how ugly this world can be, and especially to that other, that what your preconceived notion was. And they probably thought like my mother was all types of things. My mother was married. Her husband just happened to be in the Army during the first Gulf War and was stationed overseas and whatnot. But my mother didn't have kids out of wedlock. My mother was married before she graduated high school. And so by the time she was 22, she had 2 infants. I know the world looked at her in a way that wasn't community, that wasn't embracing, that wasn't seeing that young mother with these 2 young kids and saying, how can I help her? How can I make her journey, her road a little less rocky? You spoke to, we got subsidized lunching in school, either reduced or free at whatever point of our lives. And in order to get that, it was a very extensive packet that I would,
fill out.
I would have to fill out, but I would first have to let the kid, that you would get your first day of school, you get that back to school packet. And if, you want to sign your kid up for free or reduced lunch, like you would give this different color slip back to your kid. And they would have to give it to the teacher, and then the teacher at the end of the next day. It would be something like, I would have to go back I remember it. I would have to leave recess, which was the last class I had, and would go back to Miss Claggett's class. This was 3rd grade. And it's like this, it was like she was just judging my legacy, my future, my mother, who she was, the whole lineage of who we were just by that slip. And it wasn't even an acknowledgement of my existence even coming to get that. It was like she saw that color of that pink huge slip in the corner of her eye and was just like picking up a packet from a pile and just hand it over without even making eye contact. And then I have to bring that home. And my mother fills this out extensively. And then, but for it to activate, I couldn't bring it back. My mother would have to come to school and submit it to the office. And I could equate that, I'm sure that felt like a walk of shame, that I'm not good enough, that, because we were very bright kids. I mean, obviously, I fared out pretty well. I'm not a rocket science, but, one thing my mother did instill into us was an understanding of academics, and, that can be the key for you charting your destiny. And
did you have to stand in a separate line?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so after that was all processed, it was kind of like the same way in which we don't want this to feel like, we don't want our restaurant partners to make meals for us to be this to be a second thought. They make our meals before they're going into dinner service. But no, the kids who were paying would go through first.
Right. Oh, really? They went through first.
Yeah, because it was just a simple.
It's not two different areas. It was like
it's only one area. It's only one cafeteria. It's not two separate cafeterias. It wasn't like segregated because it's Baltimore City public schools, and even when I was in Catholic school, no one had the space or infrastructure to have two separate cafeterias, and so it's that. And looking back, like that dehumanizing of those innocent children, and that's really when I look at that stat I laid out before, that 1 in 4 kid that's food insecure. I think of myself in that, and if I'm being honest with myself, I unpack a lot of that in this work. I'm so grateful for this outlet. It allows me to pour back into that because I still have a lot of mixed feelings about all of that, a lot of traumas, a lot of tension that exists internally. But this is a beautiful outlet for me I get a lot out of this than I pour into it. I would say, or it may be the true reciprocal relationship where, yes, I'm doing great work, but it's also healing me in the process. And it's also allowed me to really mend my relationships with my mother.
So you've got a commercial kitchen here in Manhattan at your headquarters. Who works here and what are their backgrounds? I mean, not specifically, but give us a sense of the range.
I love you ask who works here, because who works here is and that's really the story that I love telling. That's really the most rewarding part about this work. The people who I get the great privilege and honor to lead are just representative of this full mosaic of humanity that we're trying to bring back here. They are individuals like myself who have, migrated in traditional silos of our industry and are looking for work-life balance and want to really give back with their God-given talents. But then there's those interesting mix of those individuals who have a great young man on my staff who has a lot of privilege. And how we define equity here at Rethink, and what I challenge at least my team and my colleagues as well to do, is really equity is looking yourself in the mirror, identifying what privilege you have, and then utilizing to uplift other people. He comes from a lot of privilege. Again, graduated from NYU this past spring, but then through working here, has made this catalytic shift to wanting to be in this space, become a chef, and do this type of work. And then there's the amazing human beings who are some of the strongest individuals that I've ever met in my entire life. And those are our team members who represent the Hispanic diaspora. And it's so fittingly we're having this interview during Hispanic Heritage Month, that came here in that wave of 220,000 plus new neighbors. That's how we look at them, who came by way over the last 2.5 years in the asylum seeker. They call it a crisis. I don't call it a crisis. This is what New York is and what it's always been. It's just, I guess we look at it this way when that orientation and hue is different than what was in the last turn of the century, because it's no different than what happened 100 years ago.
No, it's just different part of the world.
Different part of the world and different color of people.
Yeah.
And, seeing them be a part of this and just understanding their lived experience, in which most of us can never understand truly. Team members who walked all the way from Colombia to our northern border with Mexico. A mother and daughter duo, along with their son, little brother, respectively, who immigrant story is a Rethink story. I'll tell you that. My founder and CEO, my boss, our visionary leader, Matt Jozwiak, his wife is an immigrant. My partner is first generation of immigrant mother. Many of our colleagues are immigrant. Our co-founder, Chef Daniel Hume, he is an immigrant. And that's what I love that power, because Daniel Hume, of 3 Michelin-starred, 11 Madison Park, 13 consecutive years, Michelin stars, one of the best chefs in restaurants in the world. He's an immigrant. That's who's in our team. And so what we say all the time is we always have the full spectrum of culinary talent here. We have space for anybody who has passion and drive for this work, but also adds a layer of depth. We are grateful and better and more able to serve our communities because of all of these disparate lived experiences that culminate together in what is Rethink. And that's just a microcosm of what is New York.
What do you all cook in the kitchen here, and how do you decide what to cook?
What do we cook? We cook real food for real people, and that's really the impetus of of the unique way of having this chef lens on this work is that what we like to say is that we're not nonprofit people trying to make food. We're food people who just happen to run a nonprofit. So the food that we're making is delicious. How we define our meals is a hot, nutrient-dense meal comprised of a protein element, carbohydrate, and vegetable. However, in doing that, we curate the menus based on the unique lived experiences and demographics and diversity of communities that we serve. You know, what I always say is that how we feed Washington Heights is uniquely different than how we feed the Bowery. And how we determine what we're making is, well, first let me just put the rest, maybe one misconception. We don't make our production based on a menu. We react to the excess coming in off the truck. And people say, well, how do you plan properly? Well, it's not like we're doing like in real time, day to day. Like we live about 2.5 days ahead of our service schedule, but more so just in the muscle memory, the cadence of doing this for a number of months and years. You get a flow of, though you don't know exactly what's on the truck, you get a flow of seasonality and what you can expect to be on the truck. And there's our core regulars that we know that we will have on the truck. And then also based on the route, who we're picking up from, let's say like we're picking up from Chelsea Market, which is our Thursday route pickup. We know that from those individual unique stalls that celebrates, Chelsea Market is like a hub, a culinary cathedral. We're going to get, all these East Asian specialty items from Pearl River Mart. And we're going to get all these amazing Italian delicatessen ingredients from the amazing deli they have there. And it gives the posture to really lean into one of the underpinnings of our mission and our service, which is cultural relevance, cultural competency, which really boils down to the same way that people want to be spoken to in their preferred languages and identified by their preferred name and preferred pronouns. Well, gosh darn it, people want to eat food that's salient to their lived experience.
And tell me about these restaurant partners. Who are they? How do you find them?
These are independent restaurant partners, and how we found them was like during COVID, when we spun off the second program of what we do in this work, which is that restaurant program we call our Neighborhood Meals Program, in which we give grants to restaurant and empower them to make meals on our behalf. That's really just coming by way of understanding that industry, because we are ilk of that industry. Most chefs, so too. Things I can tell you for sure that almost all chefs are uniformly aligned behind this. We want to be doing this type of work. We rather be feeding people who need our meals than those who just can afford them.
Right.
And then secondly, we all hate food waste. We all hate seeing food go to waste because we know the need. We know the need on our staffs. I mean, most of our team members would be food insecure, but for the fact that we provide meals part of our jobs. That is one thing, that we might get paid the big bucks, at least you're going to eat. And so those are the restaurant partners we're doing, and primarily we focus on independent restaurants because we look at this not just as supporting the restaurant industry, but also empowering them. Some of the best authentic cuisine that I've had is from our partner restaurants. And then also built into the pie is that they're helping support the need of their communities. It scales from, fast casual to fine dining, everyone in between. We don't relegate this as only a certain type of restaurant, a certain type of chef can do this work. No. We believe in the inherent human dignity of all people and the inherent human dignity of all work. And so it's those ones that are those hole in the wall, mom and pop, second, third generation ran operations that I love the most. They've been tried and tested and they've been fortified, but also they've experienced the upside of community and been there when community was down.
Right. And who gets these meals?
Anybody. Again, like I said, we don't have qualifiers. Yes, we're combating food insecurity, but obviously, anybody can go to any of our CBO partners, any distribution, and get a meal. That is the spirit of what we're doing. Just like anybody can walk into a supermarket and buy anything. It's like anybody walk into a restaurant and buy anything. Some of those food insecurity isn't stagnant. It may be seasonal, and there's a lot of people here in New York City who are partially food insecure, which we call them the mid-monthers, like after their subsidies run out and they're just, counting the days down until that next re-up, whether it's food stamps or whatever the case may be. For that period of time, they're food insecure. And so we just wanted to be approachable for anybody in the community.
Could you talk about a couple specific communities that just jump out at you, just anecdotally, where, the meal that you made for them and what they're, who they are and where they are in the city?
I see where you're going with the question, but I mean, I would say the Upper West Side is a community that that jumps out because we service all 5 boroughs here in New York City, and we're serving a multitude of communities. But I think the power of what we are offering in this space, leaning into our identity, rethinking food, we also are rethinking people's orientation around this and being able to showcase the unique need of what food insecurity is, and really it also celebrates a unique binder of what we're trying to create with community. Many people, when you hear the Upper West Side, you don't think food insecurity, but there very much is. A lot of our seniors, a lot of our senior individuals who, may be living or existing in a fraction of the lifestyle they once had. Maybe, their spouses have passed on, or, family has moved away and they're very isolated, or, mobility or age has caught up with them and they're no longer able to make meals. And so we provide a number of kosher meals to seniors in the Upper West Side because they have a very unique dietary preference, which is something that we celebrate, cultural competency, but also the notion of yes, this exists here. And what we are trying to showcase that food insecurity exists in every single community, just like restaurants exist in every single community. And that's why a solution of marrying restaurants to make meals is so powerful, but it's also not rocket science. It's not creating anything new. It's assessing the landscape and connecting the dots. Another community that comes top of mind is actually a campus community, LaGuardia Community College. These are individuals who are going. Yeah. And since that we first started doing that work, LaGuardia was the first campus of what was kind of like our entree into the CUNY system. And CUNY, for those of you that aren't here in New York City, is the City University of New York, which is a local public institution, system of higher education, in which we have several campuses all across the city. And to give New York City the credit, and New York State more broadly, because it is a complementary system, SUNY system, which is the State University of New York, in which they do offer this very highly subsidized access, almost entry-level access for anybody to higher education, which we do know that is laying those seeds of upper mobility. But yeah, going back to LaGuardia, just getting on campus and seeing the diversity of students and seeing these amazing individuals who, like myself, are working
sometimes
all day,
40 hours a week.
40 hours a week, and then having to go to class.
Full-time students.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then what we're supporting are what's called the Adult Continuing Education Program, which essentially those are the students who are working 40 hours a week, full-time jobs, and they're taking their classes at night. And unfortunately, the current, we're approached to provide meal offerings in general to students who are there at night, because the existing dining services only operates Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. But in doing that, we learned about this amazing care network, LaGuardia Cares, in which they have a food pantry. They have a repository and space for toiletries and all types of non-perishable necessities as it relates to hygiene. They help pay people's cell phone bills or internet bills. They help people get laptops, all of those soft services that are needed, particularly for what we celebrate here in New York City, this mosaic of diversity, and primarily coming from that immigrant experience. Well, most of them are students who are first-generation college students or have no family history or legacy of having to navigate a higher education system. And so, yes, people look at, I get a scholarship. Oh, you're paying my tuition. That's great. But then you aren't covering all those ancillary costs that it's required to be successful in a 21st century higher education environment. Yeah. You need a laptop. You need internet. And just seeing how, just like our public school teachers in the New York City DOE system, and just like how nurses go above and beyond for that extra layer of care, recognizing that, this is what it looks like to give good service. You kind of see the line where I'm going at, where totally. that yoking of service. And so if we're doing this work here at Rethink, this is what it looks like to do this properly with intention.
Yeah.
You don't half-ass it. You don't just provide the bare minimum just to get something out the door to help thinking you're supporting somebody, but you're doing it from intention, but also from a standpoint of providing that extra leg up. So with LaGuardia going in there with that initial conversation, wanting to do that and seeing all the ways that they're helping to incubate their student body. It was, contracting work takes a very long runway, but for this, after just being there one side on that first initial site visit, I'm like, oh yeah. We started sending donations to the food pantry the next day.
Wow. That's amazing.
Because just but it's amazing, but it's also an indictment of ourselves as a system, as society, as a culture.
Well, that relates to this other issue. We're in New York City.
Yeah.
This is like one of the wealthiest places in the world.
And also the food capital of the world.
And the food capital of the world. Like, why is there so much food insecurity here? And like, you see this from so many different angles. Like, what do you see? Like, how could a broader public understand what's going on if they could see
Absolutely.
what you see?
I mean, the biggest problem, what I see is that it's a two-pronged problem. First and foremost, again, going back to what I was speaking to a little bit ago, operating from a place of intention. What exactly are we trying to do? Just saying we want to end homelessness, say that we want to solve food insecurity, well, define that, because those are very lofty goals, and it's very also subjective. The more lofty it is, it's hard to narrow and define, and also to show metrics and success. What are we trying to do? And so, yes, our mission is to create a more sustainable and equitable food system. And what we're doing is combating food insecurity. But really, you hear me talk about it all the time, our mission within a mission is to elevate the quality of the experience that the individual has in this. And the other one is just being okay with understanding and honest with yourself, understanding that big problems take a lot of time, but also a lot of hands involved. It shouldn't be, we're looking to this one individual or one entity to be Superman and save the day. No, what saved the day is community. And I'm reminded of a posture. I'm old enough, but also young enough to respect and understand that really where I saw a community at its fullest and most vibrant was post 9/11. I remember that day, most of us who were born, before 2000, before 1995, we remember that day poignantly, whether I was a preteen, but I was in 7th grade. I was in gym class. I remember when it happened, and I just remember how we collectively came together as a community. And, everyone always likes to remember that nostalgic point of, people putting flags in the window. It would be in their local newspapers. Well, the first newspaper to do that, if you didn't know, was the Baltimore Sun. And everyone from West Baltimore to East Baltimore, North, South, all around, Republican, Democrat, Ravens fan, Redskins fan, that's what their name at the time was. All those other differences of otherness were put aside, and we were all Americans for a good period of time, at least for a strong year. There was hyper patriotism, and we could just see, we all felt hurt that day, because what was our perceived invulnerability was broken. Someone broke into our home. Someone attacked us in places where we felt. And I kind of use that as an analogy to what we're doing here at Rethink, because bringing up that 1 in 4 kid here in New York that's food insecure, their innocence is bliss. They are not revealed to the ugliness of this world, how individualistic it can be, how rugged it can be, until they're that kid that's standing in that other line to get their lunch and not with their friends.
In addition, you all are rescuing food and making sure it doesn't go to the landfill.
Yeah.
Do you see other environmental impacts of the work you're doing? Do you, how upfront and intentional is that kind of environmental
Absolutely.
side?
I think that we uniquely as chefs, we don't want to lead from that environmental standpoint. And really it was something where I kind of took, I'm not patting myself on the back here, but I'm a natural messenger. I know how to create a message, create a narrative, create a story, but that was something I struggled with really taking on the leadership of this vertical and being engaged as one of our preeminent external messengers of this work and of our mission, is reconciling the two. Because as a chef, coming from the culinary community, I looked at a lot of the environmental posture of this coming off from a very pious, viewpoint, very, leaning in the piety and purity of all these environmental values. And even if you curb on one thing, then it's wrong. Well, that's not the world I live in. A, as a chef, and B, as someone who's always operated from, I don't want to say a posture of scarcity, but, had to always be creative, rob Peter to pay Paul to get things done. And then just operating from that's a level of privilege. And I want people to understand that when you can hold your values true on that, you're coming from a place of privilege because you haven't had to be, adopt that model, which I've learned very early on, any port in a storm. If it's a policymaker who I wouldn't traditionally vote for, but they're offering to bring X amount of jobs to a community and elevating the, the average collective quality of life to X amount percentile over X amount of years, well, that's something I'm going to consider because I do know that especially for our most disadvantaged, under-resourced, mostly forgotten communities, voiceless communities, that's real. Because what most people want, they don't ask for a handout. They just want a fair shot at it. And oftentimes, I don't think it's from a place of malice or ill intention, but a lot of policy is written from a perspective of hypotheticals or theory. These are not people who have ever been on food stamps. People that regulate food stamps most of them have never been on food stamps. People who regulate food. The Farm Bill is the biggest piece of legislation that dictates a lot of this inequity in our food system. And its primary focus is really big ag of how we commoditize food, not on the movement or nourishment of people in need of food and how we should shape a food system, but just on the bottom line of commoditization. And so when you're holding that piety of your viewpoint of the environmental impact of this, you turn a lot of people off. And so when we look at the work that we're doing here, we hyper focus on all that we're doing in service of our communities and in collecting the food excesses from every appendage of the food ecosystem. Yes, we enjoy this amazing environmental upside, but then that's icing on the cake. Our primary focus is combating food insecurity, but in doing this in community with all of our partners. Again, the power of community is what we're really showcasing and rethinking how you do this work. You get all this upside on it. And that's where I've found it was our true power and really in celebration of sustainability and the environmental impact. It's not, the millions of gallons of water that we are saving, the millions of tons of carbon emission that we're offsetting. Because yes, we do operate a fleet of vehicles. And my big thing is if we're going to go out, we're doing this work and saying we're doing this and capturing, using vehicles with emits carbon, that we're somewhat net neutral on our carbon footprint, which we are on a goal to do by 2030, but indirectly, that we at least steward all of that properly.
And so I don't think it's coincidental that the thing you do that is more environmentally sustainable is also the thing you do that combats food insecurity.
Absolutely. And that's the power of community because
those are issues they're so inherently linked that of course you're going to address both of them.
Absolutely. When inherently linked, it reminds us of, and this notion, and it's funny because I've been we're here in New York during Climate Action Week, and I've been all these conversations and convenience with sustainability experts from all around the world and whatnot. And we keep coming back to this term indigenous. And at What Brings You to Town, the Climate Film Festival, and we met up on Saturday, and I got to moderate the panel from after a screening of The Jungle, which is a modern documentary refresh of the classic Upton Sinclair novel, in which it's taken a 21st century look at the meatpacking industry and whatnot. And the protagonist, Reggie, he offers up this indigenous posture of farming. And we're talking about farming, we're talking about agriculture and harvesting of animals. But he says something so beautiful and poignant, and he says that, we are all both indigenous and colonizer in the same space. We're all indigenous to our humanity. And that's kind of something similar I say about, what makes it so easy to do is that food reminds us of our shared sacred humanity. And coming back to that indigenous nature of all of us, we're indigenous to this human experience, and we all know what it feels like to be hungry. We all know what that looks like, what that need is, whether it's for a medical need, our personal satisfaction or enjoyment, or just basic biological sustenance. We all feel that. Now, the preference and the versions and how and what we eat may look different, but we all feel that same sensation. I normally wouldn't eat a vegan lunch, but my friend John's in town, and so I want to enjoy a meal with him. And so we're going to go to a vegan restaurant, and that's the consensus that I'm going to find, because I value the fellowship with John above my personal preference of my dietary habits for that one meal for this one day.
Right, totally. Awesome. Where do you see this work you're doing at Rethink going from here, and what do you want to see change out in the world as a result?
Okay, John, ask me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This work and this mission, where I see it evolving and going, where I want to see it evolve and go, is I want it to be hyper local, hyper micro. And so to the extent in which I think in 8 years, we've demonstrated a very applicable model. We've demonstrated the viability of what we're able to do, not just here in New York City, but also in different landscapes and communities across the country, which is very important because we recognize the unique advantages that we have here in New York City. But we also recognize in New York City, because of its beautiful, diverse mosaic, as I always allude to, is not only of people, but geographic reach. It is a microcosm of the country, and it is a test market of viability. And so we're confident with the impact that we've created here that this work can be done elsewhere. And now what we're being very intentional in doing is creating the seeds, the SOPs, the vehicles for other communities to adopt this without having us to be the predicator, that catalyst of getting it out there. Particularly, I want to see more chefs and more restaurants doing this work. When you're opening a restaurant, that not only is it a component to have the best wine program and bringing, the best talent that's worked in Michelin to star restaurants, but also what is our commitment to our community? What is our service component? Who are we going to partner with to ensure that when we open this restaurant in this community, that yes, we will be a hub of culinary innovation and talent and a great experience, but how do we, again, use our natural mantle, as restaurants are community centers? Restaurants were the first community centers.
Right. And they could be less exclusive community centers.
Absolutely. I mean, you just think back to if you believe in how we evolved in society, cavemen often took the practices of our mammal predecessors, that oftentimes safety in those environments was in a pack-like environment. Communities.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Everyone hunted together, and then you eat together. That's what I want to see. I want to see more restaurants taking this mantle and doing this work without us. And that's why we are advocating for our tax credit, both at the state level here in New York, which we just got it introduced into Albany 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And at the federal level, because this isn't a Republican or Democrat situation. This isn't an urban or rural problem. This is a human problem.
And what is the tax credit?
Basically, the tax credit is the legislative vehicle that incentivizes what we do, giving restaurants grants to make meals. And so if you're relying on Rethink or said nonprofits, philanthropic endeavors, that's going to limit what you can do. And like I will keep reiterating, as many people will give me a soapbox and platform to say, chefs want to do the work that I'm doing. They're just curtailed by various factors. Just a barrier of access. Most believe that this type of work, because our industry has trained us to adopt the commoditization and bottom line capitalistic nature of our industry and the food system, they've trained us that this is illegal. Everyone who's hearing my voice right now, donating food is not illegal. The Good Samaritan law, just like if you were to render first aid to someone in a medical emergency, covers and absolves you of all liability if you are doing so from a place of good intention. And again, I will just a caveat that you need to have the professionals trained in place to do this. We as chefs are perfectly positioned to rethink food because we understand time, temperature, abuse, and we steward this process from donation capture to movement of food and the production of meals under those same strenuous codes and guidelines as whatever jurisdiction health department that our operations operate in.
And so if you're donating food under the current system, if you donate $100 worth of food.
Well, it's not even food. And see, the thing was happening, first of all, people are taking advantage of it. It's mostly your large scale organizations, like your big franchises or corporations who are like donating like 10 pallets of flour. And you can write off that.
That's a deduction.
Based on the weight of all those pallets, it equates to a certain number of meals that you can deduct that. And first of all, deductions, again, when we look at the focus of restaurants that we are empowering It's not the McDonald's, the Applebee's, your large franchises. These are independent small businesses. I tell people, like, what we're doing is we are creating, and through feeding people, we're providing capital and enterprise to Main Street job creators. That's who they are. And when you invest in them, not only do we get this benefit of them serving their neighbors, but they also are creating jobs for their neighbors, hyperlocal. They're purchasing from purveyors, hyperlocal. And these are all tax dollars, should tax dollars not stay within the jurisdiction of where they're serving. So right now, you have basically most small independent restaurants don't take advantage of it because they don't have the sophistication of accounting.
To do this deduction.
Accounting professionals do this deduction, and it doesn't really make sense. Tax credit.
How would that work?
Tax credit basically is like what we're first asking you to do is, our model is, we're not asking you to do something separate than what you are currently doing. And for most operations, outside of the work they're doing to serve their consumer, they also make a family meal every single day. And a family meal is what they feed their staff per shift every single day. And so what we try to inspire people to do, that, especially if they're first onboarding into our Neighborhood Meals program, is like, hey, what you make for a family meal, just make 3 times the amount. A portion out what you're going to serve for a family meal, and the rest of it, those are your Rethink meals. And then you're doing it. And so it's no additional operational hardship, but also the incentive to do it was that I can then claim that credit at the end of the year. A credit is upfront before you even go through your taxes. That deduction, you first have to understand what your taxable obligation is, and if you even qualify for that deduction. And then you have to be hyper meticulous in detailing all of those compliance touch points of records and data and audits for that deduction. And most people don't do it because you don't want to open yourself up for that auditing, because most independent restaurants don't have the sophistication of accounting practices or have a third-party firm that can do that on their behalf. But McDonald's does.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And so what we want to do is make something, and like we do for our work and impact, make it easier, meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Give them something of value.
And that makes it easier for the restaurants to participate in
Absolutely.
this.
It creates an incentive. And for me, it's going again, any port in the storm. I don't have the luxury or privilege from the posture that I occupy in this role, and understanding our need to dictate, I only want restaurants who truly want to be altruistic in this space. No, if you just want an additional revenue stream and you want to draw down $50,000 a year and it requires you to make X amount of meals for your community, and you're just doing that just for that, I'm okay with that, because the impact's still going out there and benefiting everybody else. And that's, the consensus that I have to be okay with, to ensure this work is consistent, sustainable, but also we amplify and meet the growing need that's out there.
Cool. So Rethink Food was only founded a few years ago, really.
Yeah.
And it's seen explosive growth and success. Why do you think the work you all are doing is resonating so much in this city?
I think because it's simple. We make it simple. We don't try to overcomplicate it. We truly are rethinking what people's notion is of this. Like, Matt always says to me, even when I'm having when I hit those operational walls, or I'm having, stressful week or whatnot, he says, Ken, just stop, breathe. This is lunch and dinner, not life and death. And to an extent, it is life and death for the severity of what we're doing, but like those things that I'm focusing on right now, the power of what we are putting out here in this space, those are just, me wanting to hone in on these operational perfections. But the impact is there, and it's that growth, to your point, and being able to be graceful for yourself, is that, we don't want to embody that perfectionistic mentality, because we don't want our communities to feel like they have to be perfect to come to us. It's kind of like that analogy of church. Some people feel like, they have to be the perfect person to go to church. Well, then why are you going to church? Like, when I stop drinking, I'll go to church. No. You go to church now if you want to stop drinking, to be convicted in a way to help you. And that's what we want. We don't want to espouse that you have to be the perfect person or the perfect type of recipient to get this, because we make mistakes. We mess up. But community is also about that balance of grace and mercy. Acknowledging, again, being able to see yourself in that individual. And so that hyper acceleration that we experience is really empowered to that community, because when funny story, like when we first started really accelerating, and it was after we turned 11 Madison Park into a soup kitchen, money just started flowing in. And we were an organization that was used to incubating a certain amount of capital, and then we're getting these 7, 8-figure donations coming in. That's partly why we spun off the neighborhood meals program, because we just didn't want to hold on to that much money because we didn't know how to manage it or what to do with it.
One kitchen.
But our restaurateurs, our partners, our chefs, they're running for-profit businesses. And it was also during a time that we were in the thick of COVID, and they needed our help and support. And so the power of community and being there for particularly the hospitality industry in that moment was so unique. I think also just that premise of like, wow, this is a catalytic moment for ourselves, but let's make it catalytic for how we rethink the posture of the food system here in New York City. Yeah. And it's just that word of mouth. That's what community is. When you do one great thing in one community with great partners and they talk about it to their networks, and then their networks know who you are, and you're doing it in another community and they talk about their networks, and 8 years later, we are pretty much, when you think about thought leadership in food, rescue, access, particularly from the restaurant or chef's perspective, we're top of mind. And that's really what's channeling our growth. And our growth hasn't been a hierarchical, linear trajectory. We'll have great peaks, and then we'll be in the valley. And it's in those valley seasons when we have to rob Peter to pay Paul, do the same impact with much less, is when we rethink ourselves and have the most innovative solutions to how we approach this work. And I think that's where you see the uniqueness of what we are. And I think that's also what celebrates our growth and just the public acknowledgement of who we are in this space in such a short period of time, is that the way that we're doing this work is uniquely different. It's marrying all things. I actually had a panel today in which was one of our retail partners, Happier Grocer. And I don't know if you don't know Happier, they're kind of like the Erewhon of New York City, a very high-end, posh retailer, but just like how we're situated here in Greenwich Village, the 22nd wealthiest zip code in America. There's such power in being here, working with brands like Happier, collecting excess from 11 Madison Park, and bringing all that in the community to service people in need.
Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, your work has a huge impact on the people who eat the meals themselves. But what I've noticed spending time here is it also has an enormous impact on the people who are making the meals and donating the food and being a part of the system in all kinds of ways. Yeah. How do you think about that, and why are the benefits of this work so profound and far-reaching and really touch everybody who's involved?
There you got me again, John. That's something I tackle with a lot, and I live in intention of, because I've always been cognizant that I never wanted to use this platform or this work or have it be perceived that it's leverage for my own personal or professional success or definition. That, I'm just a cog that's truly been called to do this work. And, the first and foremost, you talk about the individuals who help bring this work to life. And those is the amazing team that I have the honor to lead and serve. I serve them. And when outside of my faith, that is the well of strength that I draw from in doing this. And so when you hear the passion I speak about this work and the energy I bring to it, they're the catalyst of that. They are that reason, because I've seen just how meaningfully important it is. And particularly for those it's not to call out any one person over the other, but those that for otherwise could never see themselves in this space. Those that have once received these meals. Again, we put a lot of shame and over just a lack of resources. That's what poverty is. It's just a portfolio of resources. And for people to have a sense of belonging, community, and you just see that with that power of feeling belonging, and what it makes you walk different. It gives you a sense of confidence. And that belonging is more so just being in community, being in fellowship of other people. And the fact that this group of people who are so uniquely different, we are a very quirky group of individuals here at Rethink Food, but all in quirky in all the best ways. And I guess that celebrates that same mosaic of diversity that we are serving we also exist in that. And we exist in those, all of the upside and downside of community. But when I look at the individuals who do this work, those are truly angels among us. And that's why when we moved into the space here, we have a completely visible kitchen in which the first thing you see when you walk in the door is a full, complete sightline to our kitchen. We don't want this to be a mystery to anybody. We don't want people to think that, TV magic, or to combat those stigmas that we are dumpster diving. Like, there is no mystery to this. You see that we are real people making real food, but also, more importantly to me, giving gravitas, giving prestige to this work. That this is just as important, if not more important, than making beautifully artistic, manicured plates at a 3 Michelin-star restaurant. Yes, that's a craft, and we celebrate the artistry of that. But this is a human expression of service, of nurturing, of community. That the people that do this are, in most other spaces, are looked down upon, are judged. People come in with their preconceived notions, and that's always going to exist. I don't have the power to change any of that. But for the time they spend here, and for most of us that are working people, we spend most of our time at work, they will know their value. And there's healing in this work, because I felt that healing. And what I love is inviting people who I can sense and see needs that healing. And you feel just as important as a doctor. And I think that's a powerful expression of why people like my team, most of them adopt the same attitude I have about this work, because we get a lot more from being in service to our communities than the communities get in us serving them. This is very meaningful. It helps us deal with our relationship to food and nature, our families, our relationship to our city. Helps us understand our need for community. And I think people, as we've advanced with technology, and as people who may traditionally not come from resource communities or homes and become more upwardly mobile and get more and more resources, we try to convince ourselves that we can just do this on our own, or that we just need this individualistic, rugged me, myself, and I, or me and my family. And no, we are designed, coming back to your first question, we're designed to be in community. We're designed to be in fellowship with one another. And the people who selflessly do this work. Yeah. And then when you look at our partners, and even that approach with our internal team, that's what also makes this mission resonate with the unique, different communities that we serve. It resonates because in any community that we serve, you can find a glimpse of yourself or your community in the shape of somebody here at Rethink. And it makes it familiar, because it's with that familiarity that gives us the invitation to engage. And I say all to say, because last night was a very special moment for me, and culminated in a lot of years of work and dreams that I dreamt that I never thought I would live. We got to cook at the James Beard House. And those of you who don't know, the James Beard Foundation is like the recording academy for the culinary world. Yes, most people probably know the famed James Beard Awards, but the foundation is so much more, and it's really cultivating and culminating and creating this community of chefs, and really adopting. If you go to their website and look at their mission, it's almost aligned in what our mission is, to add more sustainability and equity into the food space. And I got the great honor to cook at the James Beard House, which is here in New York City, and that was James Beard's actual house, and it's been turned into this amazing culinary cathedral where, it's not a restaurant that's open every single day, but they do programming there, and its programming is for chefs. And so it's like the audience it's like where chefs go to be in community with each other, and having that opportunity to cook for my contemporaries in this space, but at such a hallowed and prestigious place. Cool. Those things I dreamt about when I was a kid. And, last time was very special, and I know that only happened by the steps that I was following and how they were ordered. And I know the person ordering that is my grandmother up in heaven. And I know that she was looking down on me in that moment. And where though she's not here, I know she's put a lot of people in my life. Matt being one of them, like my boss. And then that was actually was crazy moment, because it was actually the first time in 4 years that I had both my boss and my spouse, my man, both in the same room. And I could look at the two of them and see clearly just how food and nature, bookends my existence. And I'm in the middle of stewarding that. These two individuals have anchored, been the roots of what I have been here in these 5 years in New York. And two of the most uniquely different people, and neither one of them were ever destined in my plan. I would have never said I would ever have a boss like Matt and never have an amazing human being as a partner like Omar. But God knew what I needed, and my grandmother knew what I needed, and they both kind of operate a little bit in how she was. And I was sitting there about to start the panel and just looking out, and the two of them were standing next to each other side by side, and I'm thinking about it right now, and it was, it was. Yeah.
Did you tear up on the panel?
I did a little bit, and I had to quickly gather my composure, because it wasn't like I was afraid of all this went on. I do this all day, every day, but it was just it was actually, I think the tearing was forced, because I was trying. I knew going in there I was feeling all types of feelings and overstimulated just from all the activity of the week. But just tears of appreciation. But also I think those tears were welling up to remind me just to take stock and just to look and enjoy this moment. And be reminded, though, that the two of them were only there. There were a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people got me to that point.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And so... Sorry, I keep... John, look what you do to me.
I know, always. Did you find the other one?
Yeah.
Oh
my God. Oof.
That's why you're good at this work, is you can connect emotionally. Well, when you think back on your relationship with food and with nature when you were a kid, what's changed since then?
I think change for me, or change in
for you,
respect
for you.
Society? For me,
how do you relate to food? How do you relate to the, food comes from nature. How do you relate to the rest of nature?
I think what's changed is I've now, the appreciation hasn't dwindled. If anything, it's amplified. I think what's changed is that I now have a sense of stewardship in my role in that equation. And so I look at food and nature as the bookends of my human existence. And I'm in the middle, and I have to steward both of those sides. Steward food in a way that I'm very cognizant about when I go to the market, because I see the donations that are coming in here. And I know that's a microcosm of what we could be getting, because people are just over-consuming. People just go to the market and just, oh, that looks pretty. That's a pretty label. Oh, this is new. Let me try this. And then they'll end up like fridges like my mom had, that's the one advantage of being in New Yorker. We have smaller appliances, right. But also just the way that we live, we are hyper intentional about our food choices. For me, it's partly because, A, I work in this work, and I am a chef, and I'm around food all day. And so I don't really need to have much food at home. But it's B, from doing the unique work that we're doing here at Rethink, and knowing that most retail partners now do have some type of donation or service arm that let me not just buy something, A, to waste my money.
Right.
And B, to have it just sit in my fridge and go to waste.
Become a science experiment.
Exactly. I'm actually very proud that when I open up my fridge, it's very bare bones. It's just the essentials. I'm really stewarding all of my resources in a proper manner, which is not just an expression of my relationship to food and nature, but also prophetic and an expression of my faith. That's one of our, values and virtues that we are expected to adhere to. That stewardship of all things that are given to me, utilizing them all and finding ways to do it. And then even when I don't feel like making a Michelin-starred, creation for dinner, just taking what I got and figuring something out. And it may not even have a name to it, but I know it's going to taste good because I have that inherent talent to do so. And being okay with that, not ordering the easy to order Chipotle or Chop, which also just exacerbates the environmental crisis. It undermines paying equitable wages. I mean, if you look at the plight of I have a lot to carry on in this core work here, but I also carry on the empathetic postures of other areas of advocacy. I look at the plight of just work here in New York City, and you see that dichotomy of service work and even sub-tier service work. I think about the canners that go around just literally digging in people's trash and collecting recyclables to take to recycle centers and get that money. I think about our delivery drivers, and unfortunately, a lot of when we talk about the work that we did and we celebrate that we did with the city of New York and welcoming our newest neighbors. Well, I told you all, it wasn't just a Hispanic population. It was represented from 22 countries all across this globe. And we had sizable, I think the largest population after those that are coming from the Hispanic diaspora, West Africans. And you'll see them just zipping up in town all throughout the city. They are primarily the face of our delivery drivers, whether it's DoorDash, Instacart, Uber Eats, whatever. And they are woefully taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And again, trying to bridge those gaps. And so my relationship with food and nature, and more broadly, it's just stewardship, understanding that it's not just, taking from the abundance of the harvest and enjoying the abundance of summertime and spring, but understanding stewardship, understanding that in stewarding on the food side, that only take what you're going to need, because that can be used for somebody else, or it can find its way to another person in need, because we do know there is need.
Yeah, totally. Well, I've asked you to bring a quotation to read. It's been particularly meaningful to you.
Absolutely.
Could you read that for us and tell us the significance of it for you?
Absolutely. Can I give you two?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the first one comes top of mind, and they're both going to be biblical verses, because as you guys haven't learned yet, probably have, but my faith guides a lot of what I do in this space. And also it's just, faith to me, I mean, yes, it's more a posture of conviction and a practice, but also it's a natural cop-out. When my brain hurts and when I'm feeling so consumed by just the weight of this world, literally, faith gives me a cop-out. One of those things that, we're given a peace beyond understanding. Just like on my wrist here, you can't see, but this is a bracelet, and that's a mustard seed.
Oh, wow.
And that's my quote. It's faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And it's just...
Say that again.
The faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And it's just reminding to be in that faith and what faith is, and really understanding what faith is, which is the antithesis of our human logic. Faith is the understanding and believing in things unseen and unknown, but it's a perfect conviction. It's unwavering. That's what faith is. And that's what we acknowledge when we say that we're believers and we are of faith.
And that's a biblical verse.
Yeah. And actually, that's always been something that got in my life. And serendipitously, one of our great partners, Jeanette Lugo of Agape Food Rescue, and I'm going to take this opportunity as I look for this, to give her an amazing shout out, because she's one of the amazing people to help us do this work. We partner with community partners all across the city, and she's with Agape Food Rescue in a very, very underreached, underrecognized, undervoiced, underserved community, which is the Brownsville area of East New York. And she's phenomenal. And just her lived experience is so phenomenal. I literally stand on her shoulders. She is a retired NYPD chaplain, now doing this work. Openly lesbian woman, married to her wife, and just in those two things, retired NYPD chaplain, just that juxtaposition of those two worlds, a faith-based tradition and dogma, very similar to mine in Catholic Church, and a NYPD community that's hyper misogynistic, and all the critiques you may hear about the NYPD, and just the most present and most beautiful human being. And she was wearing this a couple weeks ago, and I saw it and I said, "Oh, what is that on there?" She's like, "It's a mustard seed." And then she saw the conviction in my eyes, like just like your eyes just did. And they did like that. And I'm like, because I knew exactly why she was wearing that, because I mean, she's a retired chaplain. So right. I know what that invokes. And that's been something that's guided my life. Something my grandmother, that was a seed that my grandmother placed in me. It was just, my grandmother is the one who brought me to my faith. She taught me how to pray very young. And I think it's just a survival tactic of the legacy I live in. You know, as Black people here in this country, it hasn't been sunshine and lollipops. We're a very resilient people, a very resilient community, and a lot of that comes from our faith tradition and just being able to lean into these things that really don't make sense on paper, but it's so comforting. And being able to see or know that the challenge I'm facing right now, because at this point in my life, I've seen those mountains move. Me existing and sitting here in this space right now is only a testament of that. I couldn't have charted out this journey. I didn't chart out this journey. My faith has brought me to it, and that faith has come by way of just leaning into it, that perfect peace. And when I don't have the answers, convicting myself to prayer and acknowledging that, hey, I know two things. In this life, I'm going to have trouble, but fear not. My Christ has overcome this world. And those are the things that it sounds like a cop-out, but it's so comforting, because it's almost like, in the posture in which we come to the Father, he is like my dad. Like, you know, like when we were kids and like having that temper tantrum, like I just want, you know, my mom or my dad to pick me up. When I feel like all that I have no answers for it. I don't understand what's happening in the world, where it feels like just the weight of the world is too much to bear. I remember my faith. And now I have this visual reminder. I can look down at this and see that little seed and like, wow.
So describe that.
That's all I need.
Describe what that is on your wrist.
It's just a little mustard seed, one singular mustard seed centered into a clear glass disc that's calloused by just a simple black band. And it just allows the mustard seed to be very present in the center, and everything else you see is my flesh. And it was mine is also in just the juxtaposition to that mustard seed to the rest of my body. That's all I need. I just need to, and I equate that to like a second. I just need to think of 1 second of, okay, I can move this mountain.
Awesome.
Now, I don't know when that mountain's going to move. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it will move. It will move.
It's possible.
And that comes from Mark 11:23.
And can you read it again?
Yes. If anyone says unto this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believe in what they say will happen, it will be done for them. And that's, again, leaning into that faith. But you got to trust and not doubt in your heart. And so it's in those moments where it looks like, oh my God, this is not going to move. Oh, I can't get over this. If I just remember my faith. And for that, for me, it also gives me a posture I'm reminded of the stock I come from, because my faith is that's my inheritance from my grandmother. You know, she didn't leave me worldly possessions, but she gave me a posture of fortitude that is invaluable, that no one can take away. And I am a faithful Christian, and I love the Lord, but I ultimately do all this so that hopefully one day I can see it again, and you know, she'll be proud of me. Yeah. You know, that's.
Well, having somebody live with you so deeply is more valuable than anything else they can give you. That's awesome. And did you have a second one?
I do have a second one.
Okay.
And so it's John 16:33, and actually I have this pinged to my calendar. So at 4:33 every single day, this reminds me of this. And it's John 16:33. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Okay. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And what I love about this quote, it's not the optimistic sunshine and lollipops of scripture and like, oh, just do good things and you'll get to heaven. You know, it speaks of the guarantees in life. Everyone in this human journey, this walk in life, you will have trouble. But then going back again to my faith, that mustard seed. But in me, you'll have peace. If you just seek me, I'll give you peace. That peace beyond understanding, that peace that lets you go to sleep at night, though you don't know how you're going to fund this program next year. And you've created so many walks of life for individuals that uniquely wouldn't have them. You know, fear not.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing that you are actually engaging with these every day.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to.
You need the reminders, because there's always the reminders of the difficulties right in front of you.
And I purposely put it on my calendar because, as you've seen, and many times you come and visit me here,
4:30 is the perfect time.
Absolutely.
To be.
Absolutely. But also you see, my days, my team will try to pack as much work into a day for me. And I love having it on my calendar, because as those calendar notifications are pinging, or I'm running from pillar to post, I get those postures to be grounded and anchored and reminded that, yes, you may be having a bad day, but I already told you would have bad days. Yeah. Go back to that faith. Lean into me. Fear not.
Well, thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you, John.
Wonderful as always.
Always. Thank you for coming back, and thank you for always finding ways to get out there.
To clear out your eyes.
Yep. Finding ways to pull all these tears out.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Chrysalis Podcast. Please subscribe at johnfiege.earth, where you can also find show notes and all episodes of the podcast, plus my writing, photographs, and films. I want to send a very special thank you to all of our paid subscribers. Your membership allows us to grow, flourish, and remain free and ad-free for everyone. Your belief in the work that we're doing and your generous support mean the world to me and the podcast team. Thank you.